The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business, from $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters at Real Estate Marketing, Ardor SEO.
Welcome to the Icons of Real Estate Podcast. I'm Patty Teal, your host, and today we have an amazing icon with us, Luc D'Abreau. Let me tell you a little bit about Luc. His educational and professional experience is in architecture, engineering, and construction. He has been involved with projects valued at over $750 million over the past 8 years. He is part of the National Black MBA Association and African American Real Estate Professionals. His goal in real estate is to create generational wealth, leave a legacy, and provide a better life for his family. Sounds like a pretty great goal to me. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Patty. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to have you. I can't wait to dive in and find out all about your company. By the way, your company is called Make It Rain, correct?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Make It Rain.
I just love that. Like the rainmaker, it sounds like make miracles happen. It just sounds fascinating. So before I ask you how you came up with the name, though, I wanted to get your story about how you started in real estate and how you got to the point you are now.
Yeah, so I, grew up in a family that was pretty entrepreneurial, even though both my parents worked normal W-2 jobs. My dad, he was an immigrant from Trinidad, and he came here in his early 20s, and he was always doing something, right? It was very normal to start a business or to have 2 or 3 other things going on besides whatever your day job was, so to speak, growing up. And so I ended up having that as a pretty strong example growing up, Patty. And I ended up getting exposed to real estate because my parents, as they had their primary residence and then they ended up purchasing another and keeping the original one, they ended up renting it out, and they did that twice. And so they had 2 single family rentals. And I kind of saw what was going on there, and I understood why they were doing that, especially once I was in middle school and high school. And after I finished my education, after I finished grad school, I ended up reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's kind of when everything came together. Like not only the entrepreneurial piece that I got exposed to when I was younger and throughout my life growing up, Patty, but then also the real estate piece too, because that's such like an instrumental thing within Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And there were all these things that I knew to be true deep down inside because I was exposed to it, but it was just put down so clearly and concisely in Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And that ended up having a pretty large impact on me. And so at that point, I was 23 and I was working my day job, right? I was working as an engineer at the time. And I ended up looking at, okay, well, how can I get started, right? Like I drank the Kool-Aid, I was all in. What can I end up doing? I looked at a bunch of different things, right? Whether it was owning actively, myself trying to buy a fourplex, working with my brother on it, buying out of state. I lived in California at the time. I lived in Southern California in LA. And so, a lot of buying locally just didn't make sense. And it wasn't ultimately until I was exposed to passive investing and being a limited partner that I thought, okay, like this is the avenue forward. And that was mainly because I wasn't an expert and I was able to kind of outsource that to somebody else. I liked the returns. It was a way to get started. It was in a market that I liked. It was in Central Texas, my first investment in San Antonio. And so all of these things kind of moved in the right direction. Ultimately, ended up doing 2 passive deals. And my now wife and I, back then we were dating or maybe engaged. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember the exact timeline, but we ended up looking at, okay, well, there's a certain life that we want to have in the future. How do we end up getting there? What do we end up doing? And so we ended up looking at being on the active side, and hence the podcast came about. And then the company Make It Rain came about, and hence us moving out to the markets that we're investing in Central Texas. We live in Austin now. And so all of that kind of all, led up to being here and then being in the market actively, pursuing deals and running the company now.
Well, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. And I've been dying to ask how you came up with the Make It Rain name for your business and your podcast.
Yeah, so it was actually we ended up starting the podcast before we even started the company. We just started the podcast, and it's because um both of us had invested in passive deals, and our friends and family, they knew, right? And so they would end up asking us questions, and a lot of times they asked us the same questions over and over again. A lot of it was like, how'd you get started? How'd you even find this deal? How do you understand the returns? Anything and everything. And so we ended up deciding, okay, well, let's just make a podcast and kind of see what happens. And the name ended up coming about because we just sent out a survey to a bunch of friends and family. We ended up deciding to target millennials because those are the people who were asking these questions. It was literally our own cohort, our own tribe and community. And in sending out a survey, we had three names that we liked, and Make It Rain was the one that floated to the top by far. And so we ended up just naming it that. And then we're like, okay, well, let's just name it that. Let's just do a couple episodes, see what happens. And 2 years later and 150 plus episodes later, we're still doing it.
Well, I just love the name. It sounds like you're making miracles happen, which I suppose you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you work with millennials too, and that you're a millennial, and I imagine your wife is a millennial. And do you find that they're generally buying their first home, buying their first investment property? Where are most millennials that you work with?
Yeah, most of them will not have ended up investing into any sort of large real estate transaction up to that point. And when I say large, I mean at least, somewhere in the five-figure sum that they're investing, whether it's 25,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever the number might end up being. They haven't done that yet. Maybe half have purchased a home, but the ones that have purchased a home, the majority of them I know here in Texas, they're not in California. A lot of the ones that I know in California, they haven't yet, right? Because of affordability and things of that nature. But real estate is something that they want to be able to be a part of and do in some form or fashion. But buying another house and trying to rent that out and all the work that goes along with it, like the active management, just isn't as attractive, or the risk associated with it as well isn't as attractive. And so that's where, the conversations a lot of times end up starting, where they're looking to get a solid return, have it be risk adjusted, so it's relatively low risk compared to other investments, and then, not have it take up a ton of their time and evenings, nights, weekends, whatever the case may be, in managing it.
That's very, very interesting. Yeah, I was thinking it might be a little hard on those who are looking for their first home the last couple of years, and maybe things will be a little easier now just because the cash buyers were swooping in and buying everything. And you always think of the younger generation maybe not having that money saved up yet, but I could be wrong. Did you find that to be a problem in your area?
On the residential side, it has been for some people I've seen, and it's mostly because of the affordability. It's like a lot of people will have the cash that they need for a down payment,
Right. Yeah.
right? But it's
hmm
really the pricing being pushed up. It looks like, I watched the single family residential market, even though I only
hmm
invest in multifamily, because a lot of single family residential informs what happens in multifamily, of course. And prices have sort of leveled off. I don't know if they're going to drop significantly,
hmm
but it seems like they've leveled off and they've stopped rising at the rate that they have been for the past year and a half ish.
hmm So did I read, or am I correct that you started with single family and now you're strictly doing multifamily deals?
Oh, so actually, my parents, they only did single family, right? I
Okay.
ended up, when I first started, I invested into two passive deals. One was 192 units, the other one was 253 units. And then on the active side, about a year ago, had an acquisition of 42 units here in Austin, and a couple months ago, 176 units out in Tucson.
Wow, sounds like you're going to town. That is really great. Yeah. Now, I know you have a background in architecture, engineering, and construction. And how does that help you when you go in to look at
Mm.
properties to figure out if they're a good investment?
Yeah, A lot of it is I understand the development piece and kind of what's happening in the construction industry, broadly speaking, especially the past year plus, right, with supply chain issues and things of that nature. Like I understand construction pretty well. And so that ends up helping, like being able to just kind of look at a property or being able to talk to a contractor who's going to be doing work on a property, being able to speak the same language to them and know certain questions to ask that maybe somebody else wouldn't. The other piece too is just having an engineering background. I got my bachelor's and my master's are both in engineering, and so I'm the underwriter, chief investments officer, whatever you want to call it for Make It Rain, and that's helped because the math and the concepts aren't nearly as complex as they are for the degrees that I had, and so it's just an engineering problem and trying to be able to solve it if I'm looking for a certain return or being able to see like which levers can I push and pull in order to drive the returns in this model, and I can understand it pretty well.
No, I would assume that that would be a huge help to you. My brother's an engineer, and I know they have a different eye when they look at things. They know just what to look at, find
Yeah.
out if properties have problems or not. So that's great. So I know you work with your wife too, and we talked about where you got married in a blueberry farm in near Santa Barbara, where I spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
How is it working together as a husband-wife team?
It's overall it's great. It's not without its challenges, of course. And a lot of it early on, there were challenges. You know, if Daisy were here sitting right next to me, she'd say, yeah, initially she's like, I didn't want anything to do with real estate. I didn't want to work with Luke. I was thinking, I don't even know how we're going to be able to do this. And it's because, you know, I have a certain work style, right? And so I had to end up learning that it's okay. Like I need to take a step back and I don't need to control everything, right? I need to let her handle what she's handling. She'll let me handle what I'm handling. And then just kind of respect, you know, what she's taking care of and what her core competencies are and what she's doing and vice versa. But overall it's extremely like enriching and gratifying, I would say. You know, we're building a life together,
Yeah,
and it's, you know, it's a I feel like it's a privilege to be able to do that because it doesn't mesh well for everybody, right? Like romantic
right.
relationships don't always transfer over to work relationships, and thankfully thus far we've been able to figure it out,
Mm-hmm,
and kind of as best as possible take ego out of it, if you will,
mm-hmm.
and not, you know, if I'm providing feedback or if she's providing feedback to me, not get offended and kind of see that,
Sure.
okay, well, you know, she's telling me this because she wants the best thing for the company, right? She's looking at, well, where are we going? What's going to help us in the long term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been beneficial as well, and just as a learning lesson along the way.
Right. I'm sure you have different strengths. What
Oh yeah.
is your core strength, would you say?
Mine is for sure being analytical and logical.
Ah,
That's kind of what I bring to everything. It's just the way my brain already works. And so, you know,
you're an
that's
engineer.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, I end up leading sales and marketing. So that's underwriting, that's speaking with brokers. That's also everything that's related to marketing, podcasts, social media, things of that nature. And I'm very analytical, so I'll look at numbers and where are we going and are we getting the ROI that we want and things of that nature. And I'm much more introverted than Daisy is. I wouldn't say I'm scarily introverted, but I'm much more
Mm-hmm.
introverted than she is. Whereas for Daisy, she's very much a people person. The thing that matters to her the most is relationships, you know, and you know, like math isn't her thing, and like people aren't much my thing as it is for her. And so she just connects with people, you know, like that's what she does. And so she ends up handling a lot of operations for us, and then investor relations and a lot of things of that nature.
Well, I'm sure you complement each other then. That's great. Although to me, you really do seem like a people person. I just wanted you to know that. So, what's the average price of the homes that you're selling in Austin?
Oh, well, you know, for us, we're not selling any homes, but if we're looking
Oh,
like
that's right. You're more
yeah,
into the multifamily. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
we're in
Yeah.
multifamily,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But if we were looking at it on a per unit basis,
Mm-hmm.
right? the average home in the Austin MSA is somewhere in the mid to high 350s, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
It might be pushing 400 now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a large metro area, so of course the
Right.
closer you are into the CBD, the higher it's going to be. But that's right around there for an average single family residence. But then on the
Okay.
multifamily side, I say average unit price per door is 200 plus or minus. Maybe it dips closer to 150. Newer stuff is closer to the mid
Mm-hmm.
200s, but that's sort of the range that we've seen properties and multifamily trade in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And multifamily, are there a lot of different multifamily opportunities? And is this an especially good time for people to get involved in multifamily investing?
I think there are, yeah. I mean, we're recording this. I'm not sure when this will end up coming out, but we're recording this in early August. And so, it's become much more of it's shifted more to a buyer's market within
Mm-hmm.
multifamily. A lot of that is because of rates, which of course translates over to the residential side.
Right.
But then, a lot of sponsors and operators who own property right now are especially looking to end up selling because they're looking at, well, rates are going to be higher 6 months from now. That's going to affect what people will offer, buyers are willing to offer on their properties, on our properties, I should say. And so with that, the sellers are looking at it like, well, we need to end up moving now. There's been less activity, I would say, less offers being put on each property than there were before, Patty, but there's still a lot of activity nonetheless, especially here within Austin and San Antonio, the markets that we focus on.
Mm-hmm. And where do you get your leads?
So those, the vast majority, and when you say leads, are you thinking about the properties themselves?
Well, actually, I'd love to hear both the properties themselves and also the people that are interested in investing in them.
Yeah, so for the properties, the vast majority of those come from the brokers. So there's the commercial real estate brokers who
Mm-hmm.
specialize in multifamily. They are the ones who are knocking on doors and contacting owners and soliciting them to be able to sell their property for them and to represent them. And so the vast majority of deals that we see come through the broker community. There's always a handful that are quote unquote off market, meaning that
Mm-hmm.
we're on a short list and it's not being fully marketed to everybody, right? And that's really about 10% of what we see, but the
Mm-hmm.
majority does come to market. And then secondarily to that, there's also from other sponsors like sellers who we know, who we've built relationships with over the past several years. And they've approached us and said, hey, we're looking to sell this. Would you be interested? And then we just start a conversation from there. So it's kind of those 2 to 3 places, Patty. But on the investor side, a lot of it is from either my alumni network or Daisy's alumni network,
Oh.
because we both went to graduate school, and so we know
Mm-hmm.
plenty of people and higher income earners, right, who
Right.
are looking for alternative investments. We have the podcast, so that's literally a marketing tool that ends up helping us to find investors and for investors to reach out to us
Mm-hmm.
and have conversations. And then going on podcasts like this, to be frank, where we're just talking about what we're
Getting out
doing
there.
and
Right.
yeah, we're just evangelizing the message.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have a system for staying in contact with people? You said your contacts from college. Do you send out a newsletter? Do you contact them a certain number of times a year? How do you do it?
We do, yeah. So we, in order to just at the bare bones stay in contact with people, we have a monthly newsletter that comes out the first Friday of each month, where we'll go over things that we did in our own life. A lot of times it's recapping stuff that was posted on our Instagram that we have, and so we'll end up having that, and then we'll talk about, well, what certain market updates that are happening in Texas or throughout the entire country, real estate in the news, and kind of what's going on there. We'll end up talking about the most popular podcast episode that we released that past
Ah.
month.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll end up doing that. And then we also end up saying, hey, if you are interested in investing or just want to end up finding out more, then you can always like schedule a call with us, reach out to us, and just end up learning more. And at the very least, know what different options are that are available.
Yeah. And what are your goals for Make It Rain for the rest of this year?
Yeah, the rest of this year is to get one more deal under our belt here. And then a lot of it is behind the scenes work right now. So we're setting up a lot of systems around our acquisitions and systems around our operations in order to be able to scale more in the
Mhm.
following year. So those are the two things that we're really focused on is really one more acquisition, and then just being able to improve our system so that way we're able to achieve our goals that we have for the fall for 2023.
Oh, that's very cool. And what challenges are you facing?
Yeah, so challenges. We've seen that there's, I mean, interest rates, right? That's probably like the
Right.
biggest thing. Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? It depends on who you ask, right?
Right,
um,
right.
so a lot of it has been around interest rates. I mean, the last week the Fed just announced that they were going to raise interest rates 75 basis points again. They'll probably do the same thing in a couple more months, and so that just makes it more challenging to make deals work because
Sure.
the debt is such a large piece of it, right? In order to be able to get the returns that we're looking for. So that affects our pricing. And we end up having to lower our pricing when we're offering, which sellers and buyers haven't quite met yet, right? Sellers still
Mhm.
have pretty high expectations, and buyers are saying, well, no, I need
Oh.
I need to drop the price because things have
Mhm.
changed. It's like this has become more expensive, and so I need to end up dropping my offer that I'm putting in. So that's definitely a main challenge right now. And it just, you know, real estate is a pretty slow moving industry in terms of transactions, right? Transactions take, especially on the commercial side, they take,
Especially on the commercial side, those are
I
some
mean,
big transactions. So in
yeah,
between, you could wait a little while. Yes.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, on the residential side, things can move much quicker.
Yes.
It's just that there's so many more moving parts. Same
Mhm.
general idea, but more moving parts. And so it's, 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, right?
Mhm.
Typically, when you have a deal under contract, if you have a deal that you've gotten under contract, it's typically like standard is 60 days to
Mhm.
offer that as a term to the seller in order to close. So what I'm trying to say with all of that, Patty, is that as these deals transact and as they change hands over the next few months, I think the expectations will get aligned a little bit more as sellers will need to adjust, or they just won't be selling. Like that's what I see happening.
So things are maybe becoming a little more balanced.
Exactly. Yeah, things are a little out of balance right now. It was a
Mhm.
seller's market for so long, and now it's kind of shifting. It's kind of in the middle, maybe becoming a
Mhm.
little bit of a buyer's market, maybe. But that kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit. You mentioned the podcast. I imagine you're wonderful on it. Is Daisy on it as well, or are you the host? How does it work?
She is, yeah, we co-host it.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bring both of your personalities into it. Do you have guests or is it just the two of you talking? What's the format?
Yeah, so we have 2 episodes that we release each week, and the
Mm-hmm.
first episode is a guest that we have on. A lot of times, some sort of subject matter expert, whether they raise capital or they're a sponsor who ends up finding deals, or property management, asset management. We've had people who are on the debt side and do mortgages. We've had people who are on the insurance side. We've had accountants, real estate attorneys, a wide range of guests on. So we'll have that every single week. And then the second episode that we release each week is, we actually call it Coffee Talk. We're very big coffee fans.
Oh,
Um,
nice. I think I
like,
read that about
yeah.
you, that you love special brewed coffee.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so we'll end up talking about a little bit. It's like, a 5, 6, 7 minute
Mm-hmm.
episode where we just talk
Right.
about a little bit about coffee. And then we'll end up talking about a certain topic where we're focused on really trying to educate our audience. And so really the podcast exists, and why we feel like Make It Rain exists is to provide more access and education, particularly for millennials to invest. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why
Mm-hmm.
there's so much education that we work to provide. So that way people know, number one, that are available, and then number two, how to end up approaching them and having more info about it as well if they are looking to do it. So that's what we end up doing with the podcast.
Oh, it sounds so fun. And I like that you have this niche of millennials. Do you market to them in a different way, or is it just because you yourself are a millennial and you have those contacts?
It's a mix, right? I think us being, something that Daisy and I have focused on is kind of being authentic to ourselves.
Mhm.
A lot of other companies, right? They'll have names for their acquisitions, companies that are a little more traditional, right?
Right.
And ours definitely is not a traditional name,
No,
but
it's a fun name. Yes, I like it. Yeah.
it's like it's genuine and it's true to ourselves. And so I think just the way that we communicate and the way that we approach things and the things that we think about, as opposed to somebody who's 10 years younger or 10 years older than us, is genuine. And so that ends up speaking to our audience, right? And
Hmm.
so that's part of it, but then we do
Hmm.
actively work to go places where millennials are, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's why we're on Instagram so heavily,
Right.
because that's where so many millennials are right now. And so
Hmm.
we end up doing things like that in order to not only speak to them the way that we want to be spoken to, and we feel like they want to be spoken to, but then also go to the places where they're going to be as well.
Hmm. Oh, good answer. That's really interesting. So, before we go, I want to remind people that they can go to your podcast. One is is it called Coffee Time, or is it just a subtitle of the podcast? Is Making It Rain? I Make It Rain is the main name.
That's correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just a subtitle. So yeah,
Okay.
it's Make It Rain on all podcast platforms. You'll be
Okay.
able to find it pretty easily.
Okay, great. And how would they contact you directly?
The best way is through our website, actually. So it's makeitRainCapital.com. They can also email me directly. It's Luc, Luc at makeitRainCapital.com. My calendar is on the website too. So you can also schedule with me. So those are the main ways to end up getting in contact.
Well, gosh, Luke, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. You were wonderful. Really enjoyed it. And I love the way you're targeting millennials. Very, very fascinating.
Yeah, thanks so much, Patty. I appreciate the time and having me on.
Thank you. Take care now.
All right.